Today's video is a suggestion from Majad Madamani. Not sure if I'm saying that right, that's my best guess. And he wants a video on the ionic-calendar. So this is a fairly popular library, so I thought I would do a video on that. And it's going to look something like this. This is the end result. So basically, it's a custom calendar inside of Ionic-4, which allows us to, like swipe around, go to different months and so forth. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to synchronize the event data with Firebase. All right, so we're just going to set up the basic calendar and get it so that when you click on a date, you can press this Add New Event button. That will add a new event right here on the 10th. And then when we refresh the page, it'll pull all that data from Firebase, and then it'll show the event right here once again. And so thanks for the request. This is a video on the package ionic-calendar, which can be used with versions other than Ionic 2. All right, and let's start writing the code. All right, so I just have my own blank project here called Ionic Custom Calendar. And if you don't have your own blank project or just some project to work with, be sure to check out my video on getting started in Ionic, and then we'll get you set up with your own blank project. But assuming you already have a project to work with, let's get started here. We're going to be using the ionic-calendar package from npm right here. Okay, and let's go down here and look at how we install it. Says this right here. I don't like running it with --save because that makes it harder to uninstall. So I'm just going to copy that command and run it from within the project directory. So that's just installing that. And then while it's doing that, let's have a look at the usage. So first of all, it says we need to import the ng-calendar right here, like this. So I'm going to open up the module file, app.module, and then I'm going to place it up here, okay, at the top, and then I'm going to go and then add it to the imports like this, and probably clean this up a little bit so they're all on new lines. Okay, so there we go, it's added to the imports section right there. And then it says if we're using a page module, we need to add it to the page module as well, which we are doing that. I don't know if we need to do it to both, but I'm just going to do it to both anyway. So I am using a home page module. So like each page in my app has its own module file. And so if that's the case for you, you'll also need to add it here. So adding the ng-calendar module up there, and then put it down here as well. Like this. Okay, so now it's in the home module as well. Down here it says that this is the way that we use the calendar. We are going to need a lot of variables in order to get this to work, but let's just try and get the most basic example working first. So let's go inside the home page and then add in that HTML code. Okay, that all looks fine, but all these bindings, we are going to need to bind these to actual variables in the TypeScript. We'll set that up in a second. And then it also says that we need to add these imports to the main.prod.ts as a workaround for some compile issue with Ionic build. And so I'm going to do that right now. So I'm just going to copy these and add them to the main.ts. And so I'm just going to add them right here inside of my main.ts file. All right, and in order to get this calendar to work, we need to make all these different variables like I was saying. So we need an event source object and a calendar, and just all this stuff, like a bunch of events for when the time changes, when the title changes, when the event is selected, and so forth. So let's just make all these variables and then we'll explain them. So first we need an event source, and we'll talk more about this later, but basically this is where all the events are stored in the calendar. So like when the user creates custom events. And then, so that's this right here. And then we also need a calendar mode. Okay, and from the docs, the mode is just like if it's in the month view or if it's in the week view and so forth. So for us, let's go and make that let's just store it inside of this calendar object. So this one will be bound to calendar.mode. Alright, so that's where this is being used. And then the current date will also be stored inside of the calendar object. Okay, so that'll just be set equal to a new date, which sets the date equal to today, like the current time. Alright, current date and time, actually. And then all these methods for like when different things happen, like when the current date in the calendar changes, or when a range is selected inside of the calendar and so forth. We just need events for all of these if we want to listen to when those things happen. So I'm just going to make a couple functions that just log out some things, like when the title changes, just logs the title. When the event is selected, then it logs event selected, and so forth, just for all those different events. Alright, so you don't have to really do any of those things, but just for us, I'm going to have these just so that we can listen to different events that happen. Okay, so we really just want to get this working as soon as possible so that we can start working our way up to more advanced things. So I'm going to run ionic serve -b -c. Alright, and surprisingly, I got it working on the first try, so yay. There's the calendar right here. This is what it looks like. Now I'm going to try just clicking around and seeing what happens. Looks like we had some events fire already. So selected time, Wednesday, May 8th. So that was yesterday. I just clicked on it. Alright, and down here we can see that we have no events right here. And so probably a common thing that a lot of you guys want to do is create events within the calendar. So in their demo, they have a button which says load events, and that just randomly loads events into the calendar. Alright, and you can see like it just completely wipes the slate and populates the calendar with different events. So like whatever day you're clicked on right here, it loads the events down here in this events section. Alright, and then the code for that is basically, they call this function create random events, makes an empty array, and then it basically just creates a bunch of random intervals and then pushes those intervals as objects. Right here, this is kind of what an event object looks like. It has a title, it has a start time, and it has an end time, and then whether or not it is all day. Alright, and it just pushes these onto that events array from the beginning, and then it returns events. Okay, when they call load events, they say this.events source equals that. So event source is just an array of events. Alright, and so theirs completely wipes out all the events every single time. And so instead of doing something a little bit haphazard like that, what we're going to do in our app is actually just make it so that you can create an event on this particular day. Instead of setting event source to be null initially, we're going to set it to be equal to the empty array. Alright, because we're going to be pushing things onto this event source. And then what I would like to do is, first of all, get it working with AngularFire 2 and sync the data to Firestore. So I'm going to create a new Firebase project here on the Firebase console called ionic-for custom calendar. And I'm going to accept the terms and press create project. Alright, and then from the AngularFire 2 docs, I'm just going to install AngularFire 2 like this, because that's the database which I'm going to be using for this example. Alright, so Firebase is the backend and AngularFire 2 is just a package to help us interact with the backend in an easier way. I'm also going to copy this next command because we need rxjs6 and these things as well in order for it to work properly with Ionic. So I'll install those as well. Alright, next I'm going to add these imports to my application. Alright, so I'm going to go in the module file, then add the imports up at the top. I'm also going to initialize them in the imports like this, like that. And the Firebase config, I'm going to grab that from the environment file. I'm going to make a variable in here called Firebase. And then in here, I'm going to paste in my config from the Firebase web app. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this config right here and then paste it in right there in the environment. All right, and I'm also going to put this in the production environment as well. Put that right there. And then instead of Firebase config, I'm going to do environment.firebase. All right, and make sure this environment is not the production one. Okay, so now that's all set up. And then I'm going to continue the console and then go down to database and click create database and start it in test mode just for testing. All right, and instead of the database, I'm going to import AngularFire store, from AngularFire Firestore, like that, and then change the database to AngularFire store, right? Because AngularFire store is the most recent database, so we want to be using that one. All right, then back inside of the home, I'm going to go into the constructor and then inject the dependency of the database, private. Let's go with db AngularFire store. Okay, so now we have access to the database. Okay, so now that we have that working, let's just serve it back up and make sure there are no errors. So ionic serve -b -c. All right, reloading the page, looks like we have an error. It says unexpected value AngularFire store. Oh, whoops, I imported the wrong one in the module file. AngularFire store module. Common mistake, you just want to import the module here, and then inside of the home page, you import the regular one without the module syntax. So this one does not have module in the name. Common mistake. All right, so now it's working once again. Just wanted to make sure that everything was working. All right, now back inside of the home page, what I'm going to do is just make a function like a button that when we click it, it tries to make a new event. Okay, so let's make that function right here. So the function is going to be called add new event. All right, then inside of here, what I'm going to do is basically just make an event that starts now and goes for like an hour. So the event syntax looks like this. Right here, we need an object that looks something like this. So this is our goal. So what I'm going to do is say let event equals that, and we're going to fill this out. We'll say I is going to be like a random number determined by maybe like the number of minutes we are into the current hour or something like that. So we'll make a new object called now and set that equal to a new date. All right, so this is the current time. And then instead of I here, because we do need kind of like a number for this event, so we'll call it like event number something. And then this number is going to be now dot get minutes or something like that. Maybe, yeah, we'll say get minutes. Just kind of some number so that there's variation in our event names. That's all this is doing. For your app, you probably create an app some other way, like maybe use a modal to get information from the user. But for simplicity, I'm just showing you how to use the calendar. So we're just going to generate an event like this. Okay, and the start time we'll say is going to be now. And then the end time, in fact, let's rename now to start. So rename to start. All right, and then end is going to be new date. But we need to add some time to the date, to the end date, in order to have it be in the future. So I'm going to say end dot set minutes to be end dot get minutes plus like 60. So that'll be like an hour from now. And then here it's going to be end. All right, so our event, which we created, just has a title, which has the current number of minutes, just a just a number for variation's sake in the title of the event, and then the start time is now, end time is an hour from now, and it's not going to be all day. So false. Alright, so there's our little event, and what I'm going to do is say this.db.collection, and then I was thinking the events would just be stored at, like you can put them wherever you want for your app, but for us, we'll just say that it's just a global events list for all users. So if yours wasn't, you might want to do something like users slash, like the user ID, and then like events or something like that. And you would want to add to that collection, but for us, in this example, it's just going to be events like that. So events.add, and then we're just going to add in that event. Alright, so this is going to push that object onto Firebase. It's going to add it to that collection. And the reason we're adding it directly to Firebase is because if your intention is to sync your data with Firebase, it's much easier if you just start that way instead of adding it in later. Trust me on that. I've tried doing this a bunch of different ways, and it just works easiest if you just start with the database, especially if it's Firebase, because it's so simple to set up. We'll just add it directly to the collection like this. So that's adding events to Firebase, and now we also need to listen to events from Firebase, like listen to the events collection. Alright, and the way that we're going to do that is inside of the constructor. I'm going to say this.db.collection, and then we're going to listen to the events collection, events, and then we're going to call probably snapshot changes. Then we'll subscribe to that. So this is listening to basically that events collection, and snapshot changes just means that we're listening to changes to the documents themselves as opposed to just the values in those documents. If that didn't make sense to you, don't worry. It's probably not super necessary to know. It's just kind of, I'm just explaining how it works. So we're going to subscribe to those events, and so I'm going to say call snap because it's a collection snapshot. That's what Firebase gives us back right here, and when it gives us that back, I'm going to iterate over the documents in the collection. So call snap.for each, and then for every snapshot, I guess I could call this snap. We're just going to populate that events array. So I'm going to say let event equals snap.data or .payload.doc.data, and then I also want the ID on there. So this is like the data, like this stuff. That's what doc.data is. And then we also want the ID of the document. I'll show you why in a second. We need to like be able to delete it and stuff like that. That's why we need the ID. So I'm going to say event.id is equal to, oh, and I need to make this any type is equal to snap.payload.doc.id. Okay, and then I'm going to say this.events, that's what it's called. Oh, it's event source.push. And then I'm going to push the event. All right. And so this is basically just synchronizing our event source with the events from Firebase. And then also at the beginning, we need to say this.events event source equals empty array. Otherwise, every time the document changes, the collection changed, we would re-add all the events without clearing it out first. So this is how you synchronize an array with Firebase. All right, and it might be a good idea to like limit the like which events you're listening to. But for us, for simplicity, we're just going to listen to all of them. Maybe in the future I'll do a video on querying like all the different queries you can do in Firestore. So when I have that video, I'll leave an annotation up there, but for now, we're just going to listen to all the events. The reason I'm saying that is if you had like 10,000 events, you wouldn't really want to synchronize all of them at once. You would want to limit it to like whatever month you're in or something like that. But for now, we're just going to synchronize all of them. All right, so we are synchronizing the events like this. And now let's save that. And then the last thing we really need is we need a button that we can press to add an event. So I'm going to make a button here, ion button. And then on click, the button is going to call that function we made called add new event. All right, add new event. And then it's just going to be called add new event. That's the button name. And let's try that out. All right, so here's our button. And let's press the button and see if we get any errors. All right, we got one. StartTime.getTime is not a function. Let's just console log the events as they're being pushed onto the event source. So I'm going to console.log the event before we push it on, because it looks like it's having trouble reading the start time. So console.log event. All right, so let's just make sure that that's looking proper. So here we're logging out the event. Okay, and it does have a start time like this. Oh, that's because in Firebase, when you pass in a date, they convert it into, it's just called the Firebase timestamp. Kind of unfortunate that they do that, but basically our start time and end time, those get kind of messed up when they go into Firebase. So what we need to do is kind of sanitize them a little bit. So when we're pulling that data back down from Firebase, I'll show you what I mean. By the way, I'll pull up the database and show you the data. So like we do have a date inside of Firebase, and that's right here. We actually have two. I think I pressed it twice. But you can see the start and end time are there, and they are an hour apart. Everything looks good. The events have a number. Okay, and kind of what's going on here is we need to sanitize those values when they come back. So I'm going to say event.start time is equal to event.startTime.toDate, because this is how you get it back to a JavaScript date, which is what the Ionic calendar is expecting. So that's what we got to do. End time. We'll do the same thing for that one. And that should hopefully work. So let's try that. All right, so there our events are. And so you can see that the page just reloaded, and so it loaded that data from Firebase. And so the dates were persisted. Okay, and I mean, it might be kind of nice if it added the events to whatever date we were selected on. So let's do that. Let's do that instead. And so instead of add new event, just creating a new date at the current time, what I'm going to do is every time a date is selected, so that would be right here, on time selected, I'm going to synchronize a class variable called selected date. All right, and then that's initially going to be equal to the current date, just for simplicity, because the calendar should select the current date when it's first opened. And every time a date is selected, I'm going to say this dot selected date is equal to event.selectedTime. Okay, and time should be the same thing as date. Let's just make sure that it does that. So I'm going to console.log this.selectedDate. All right, and then let's just see if that logs out a date object whenever we click on a date. All right, so I'll click on the 10th, and then, yeah, so it console.log this right here. So there we go, it's working. So I'm just going to delete that console log, and then now whenever we are creating the dates, where did that function go? Here. So when we call add new event, instead of setting the start to be a new date, I'm going to say start is equal to this dot selected date, and then the end is equal to this dot selected date. Okay, and then let's say that the end minutes, and there we go. So it'll just use the selected date as the starting point. Yeah, so let's try that out. So I'm going to click on the 7th and then press add new event. And there we go, it added a new event right there, event 0. And so now when we click on these different dates, it's showing us what events are down there. And then this one still has those original two. So I can create a new event over here. Say, there we go, event 0. And then if I reload the page, we should have events on 7, 9, and 20. So there they are, 7, 9, and 20. All right, and that's basically all I want to do for synchronizing events. There's kind of a lot of more info inside of this documentation here about different things you can do. But it would really take too long to cover, so I'm just going to leave a link in the description below. And hopefully that gives you a good starting point to where you can get started with the Ionic calendar. All right, and yeah, like there's a whole bunch of configuration in here. You can change like how things are formatted. It'd probably take like 5 hours to cover all this stuff in extreme detail. So hopefully you guys understand. Please leave a comment below if you have any questions. Also leave a like if you enjoyed the video. I'd really appreciate that. And yeah, that's it for the video, you guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.